This is part 2 in the series regarding managing your Bounceback email addresses using the DBX data management application. We have seen in part 1 where we have a list of email addresses. We tried to match the email addresses that are in Goldmine and updated the key 5 field with the value Bounceback. In part 2, we will still be using the same list of email addresses, but there's a twist. Once we have found a match for those email addresses, we will be updating the email merge code for the corresponding email address. So if we take a look at an email address in Goldmine, it has this field called merge code. So our goal is to populate this merge code with a word or code BNC, meaning bounce. Also, let's take a look at what merge codes we might have available currently set up in those email addresses in the current contact set. So I have here a query that would get all email addresses displaying the merge codes of the primary email addresses. So notice that on the merge codes column, we don't really have any merge codes at all. And we have 128 rows, which corresponds to the number of email addresses that we are importing. So let's start by creating a new process. We will still be using the import update Goldmine data, and in this case we will say update contacts based on Bounceback email part 2, and we'll click next. We will accept the same task description. What we will select here would be the import contact detail. We selected this option because we wanted to match directly the detail record, which is an email address. Now, email addresses, including the primary email addresses, are really detail records and reside under the details tab. So those are the ones that we will be searching for. So we hit next. Our data source is the same text file, so we will open up the text file. We have the same set of email addresses, and we'll hit save here, and we hit next. Just like what we did with the previous one, we'll just accept the default mappings for the moment. So let's examine the settings that we have. We're importing against the contact detail. Good. We will review our data source. We have 128 rows with all the email addresses displayed. And field mappings. We don't have any field mappings predefined for us since we did not have any matching column names between the Goldmine field and the source field. What we need to do is to simply update the merge code field for the email address with a value BNC. So to do that, we need to map it against an expression. So I'll just double click that. We come up with expression and we'll say BNC, and we click OK. This is the only field that we need to update, so this is the only field that we should be mapping. Again, to map a field with an expression, you simply click on the Goldmine field that you want to be updated and double click on expression. So the next question is, how do we make sure that we are matching the correct email address? So we will explore that next. we will go to Record Matching tab and we'll create a new match criteria. So first we have to define the match expression that's coming from the data source, which is from a text file. So simply click on Edit Expression, and we want to obviously match against the email address. Now, the email address here could have a value as shown below, but I'd like to be more specific for the match, because the Detail tab can contain other types of detail record. Email address is just one of them. So what I'd like to be more explicit in my match, so I'm going to include the type of detail that I'm trying to match here. So I'm going to type email address. Now this is the one that is matched in Goldmine. As you can see here is the detail name. So that's what I'm going to use as an additional qualifier for what I'm trying to match. So it needs to be an email address plus the word email address. And I will show you why we need that expression there. So we'll click on OK. So now we need to be able to match that expression within the Goldmine data. So let's click on Edit Expression here. And what we want is really from the details. List of fields, since we are trying to match against a detail record here. The email address value in Goldmine is stored in 2 fields. Normally, if the email is short, it would just be stored in the concept ref field. However, it could also be a long email address, in which case it will store the portion of the email address in address 1. So just to make sure that we don't have any problem matching, we want to trim the spaces in these 2 fields. So I'm going to quickly format these. I'm going to trim them, remove the left spaces that are on the left side, and also remove the spaces that are on the right side. And I'm going to do the same thing to the address 1 field. So that would be L-trim and R-trim. So essentially, we now have a combination of the 2 fields that would most likely contain the email address value. So now we are just simply missing the type of detail record, which, remember, in the first expression that we built, we typed in the detail name, which was email address. And that is really in the contact field. So what we need to do is to, again, make sure that these values don't have any spaces before or after the value. So that's our trim. You can L trim here. Okay. So let's click OK. Let's add the match priority 1 and click OK here. So now we have the match criteria on how to properly match the email address. Now we move on to the advanced settings. As we have discussed in the previous part of this series, we really don't want to do any action for any email address that has not been matched. So we simply uncheck this option, and I believe we're done setting this up. So we can now click on Save and Close and just simply run the process. Okay, should be done in a second here. Great. So now let's revisit Goldmine. First, let's just run our query here and see if we get any results. We have 128 rows, and all of them had the merge codes value. Now let's take a look at some contact records here. Here's an email address. We edit this, and we see the merge code populated. Let's move on to some other email addresses. We edit this, and we again see the merge codes. So as you can see, we can either update a primary contact field based on a list of email addresses, or we can also update the merge code for the matching email address in Goldmine. Both ways are acceptable methods in making sure that your data are up to date. If you have any questions regarding the steps or the video that you just seen, please feel free to send your questions to support@dbxforgoldmine.com.